Hi, I'm Richard Lang. Welcome to AEROPS. Today we're going to interview a very special guest, a good friend, Kathleen Marden. She's literally an icon in ufology. Today we're going to talk about telepathic communication and the messages that non-human intelligence conveys to experiencers and witnesses. This is going to be a really good interview. The basis of today's interview is about telepathic communication and the messages that NHI convey to experiencers. Kathleen Marden earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of New Hampshire in 1971 and engaged in graduate studies at the University of Cincinnati and at UNH. From 1991 to 2003, she volunteered for the Mutual UFO Network in various positions as National Director of Field Investigator Training and National Founder Director of MUFON's Experiencer Research Team. She's also a recipient of the International UFO Congress Lifetime Achievement Award. Kathleen is the primary author or co-author of several books. Her best-selling book, with scientific ufologist and lecturer Stanton T. Friedman, is called Captured, The Betty and Barney Hill Experience. They co-authored two additional books, Science Was Wrong and Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers. Her book with Denise Stoner, The Alien Abduction Files, includes her investigation of 6 intergenerational cases of UFO contact. Her fifth book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You're Abducted, is a comprehensive guide on UFO abduction phenomena and a self-help book for UFO abductees. It's been published in both French and English. Kathleen has appeared as an on-camera expert on 62 television and video productions and innumerable radio shows and podcasts. Additionally, she's lectured at conferences across the United States and in several foreign countries. You can click on our website for more information, and we'll have this at the bottom of the video on YouTube. We're also very proud to announce that Kathleen is a member of our AEROPS advisory board. Without further ado, let's get started. The interview you're about to see was recorded earlier today, and it's provided here in an unedited version. Kathleen, it's really good to have you here today. I've been really looking forward to talking to you, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are really going to enjoy this podcast today. So really, thanks very much.
And thank you, Richard. It's great to be with you. For my
So,
first interview ever with you.
I think so. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's true. That's true. I've known you guys for years, and
Yes.
um, that yeah, this is the first time. The last time I was at one of the symposiums, I watched your presentation on the Betty and Barney Hill thing, the new
Hmm.
evidence that they got, and all that.
Yes.
I was there listening to it in the audience when you did that. It was really
I
good.
remember seeing you.
Yeah, yeah, you did. Yeah. So anyway, we were offline when we talked. One of the things that you had mentioned that I was interested in was, experiencers, what they recall and they don't recall, and maybe we could just talk a little bit about that because I know that people abductees that I've interviewed, sometimes people remember stuff, sometimes they don't, and of course we've done regression hypnosis. Denise is working with somebody right now on that I recommended, and I've experienced really good things by doing that. But anyway, what do you think it is that some remember, some don't? What do you think?
Well, first of all, let's think about the different types of contact with non-human intelligence, because that's something that I find most frustrating, particularly when I'm conducting a survey on a large number of people. And that's sort of what I've specialized in over the years. I'm now completing my fourth survey. It's undergoing statistical analysis. And what I'm tending to receive is a wide variety of different types of experiencers where you really can't nail down what's going on. You have your experiencers who have missing time. They might have evidence. And then you have those who have had dreams that seem too real to have been dreams, but no evidence whatsoever, no awareness of missing time, only these repetitive dreams. And then to go a little more into the shadows, you have individuals who are having this experience through meditation. It's only taking place in a meditative state, not on a physical state. Or then you have people who are doing out of body experiments. And in an out of body state, they feel
Right.
that they are moving their consciousness onto ET craft and that sometimes these non-humans can see them. And further into the shadows, we have those individuals who are having experiences while they are on drugs,
Ooh.
such as DMT, is something that
Hallucinogenic
was
type stuff.
mentioned.
Psychotropic.
Yes, psychotropic drugs.
Right.
And so that removes us even further from those who are aware of an experience and have uh, some evidence and some uh, memory. The furthest away, in my opinion, from all of the responses I've received are those who have had an experience while they were in a psychiatric hospital. So they
Mm.
were psychotic at the time that they had this experience. So uh, it's so widely varied that I prefer to stay with the individuals who have some conscious recall and to work with those who uh, might be able to, over time, acquire evidence. And so,
And by
what
evidence,
I've
you mean
found,
like burn marks, scratches, cuts, things like that.
well, even more than that, photographic evidence,
Oh, okay.
evidence on clothing.
Mm.
So, it goes beyond that. Let me give you an example.
Please.
In 2012, MUFON assigned a case to me and it was from Canada, but was no investigator in Canada at the time who could take the case. And this was just a UFO sighting by an amateur astronomer who was out and craft. He had his telescope, but a craft came in fairly close to him. And so we remained in touch. And a little while later, he got in touch with me and he said that he believed that he had been taken from his home
This is
during the
while he was
night.
observing it with a telescope.
No, no, he was in his home.
Okay.
Okay, so later, case number one. When something like this occurs, those people usually follow me for years.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever
I'm
anything
sure.
occurs, they let me know.
Right, right.
So we
I see.
go from him outside observing with a telescope when he has a fairly close encounter,
Yes.
to a, after that, these ETs coming into his home environment. And he wakes up, he finds marks on his body,
Mm.
he's completely wiped out. And then they come back periodically over the years. So another time he was sitting there in the morning reading the newspaper. When the next thing he knew, he found himself back on his bed, um, no longer reading the newspaper. And so he had that feeling again of a kind of nausea, feeling completely wiped out, and feeling that something had occurred. Then he was taken again, he thought. And so at that time, he was wearing a t-shirt. And I asked him to put his t-shirt into a paper bag and put the paper bag into a dark, warm closet. And so
Mm-hmm.
he did this. And a couple of weeks later, I said, take it out and see if it looks any different than it did. I didn't tell him what I was looking for. So he did take it out, and it was covered with a pink substance. It was a tan um, t-shirt with a little slogan on the front of it, and it had turned pink. So he sent me photographs of it, and I asked him if he would be willing to send the t-shirt to me. So he
Right.
did, and I sent it on to MUFON's chemist at the time,
Hmm.
Phyllis Budinger, and she did an analysis of it. Now, she's the one who had done the analysis on my Aunt Betty's dress, on that
Yeah,
pink
I'm
powdery
familiar. I know
substance.
who that is. Yeah.
Yes.
And what happened? What'd she find?
Well, what she found was that there was some residue that turned the t-shirt pinkish in color, but it was not the same residue that was on Betty's dress. She
Oh,
believed that it was probably perspiration because he was perspiring profusely when he was
soaked probably. Yeah.
returned. Yes, yes. So, it was different, but that was just our research into his case. Then he found what he thought was an implant, and
Where
another
was it?
time, and it was in his arm.
Oh, okay.
It was right
Yeah.
about here in his arm. And so he could palpate it. He sent me, I couldn't go up there. There was no funding to fly up to Canada to
Right, of course.
investigate this. So he sent me a photograph of his arm with the area dots in pen around where that was. And he said that he thought that he would like to have that removed. Now, of course, we didn't have any physician who could remove it for him. So he went to his own physician. And he wrote back and told me that his physician had had a little difficulty removing it, but he did surgically remove it, but it kept moving away from the scalpel. And he was able to finally get it. And I said, you need to preserve this in your own body fluid because I'm aware that
Sometimes they
these,
just dissipate. Yeah.
right, they do, that they just disappear or they blow apart or something. So his doctor put this little silver particle,
So it
or
was
larger
metallic
than a
looking.
particle, little silver metallic looking
Wow.
thing into a test tube filled with his blood. And I got in touch with MUFON's executive director at the time, and he said, have him pack it in styrofoam and dry ice and mail it to MUFON headquarters. So I had all these photographs of it in the test tube. You could see it in the test tube at the bottom.
How big was
And
it? Like maybe the
this
size of a
little,
grain of rice or a little bigger.
um, a little bigger, a little smaller than a BB probably,
Hmm.
but larger than a grain of rice.
It was shaped
And
round like a ball.
it appeared to be round, yes, like just a round ball. And so he sent it to MUFON headquarters, and they sent it on to Phyllis Budinger for an analysis of it. And when it arrived at her house, she couldn't find it. She
I knew you were going to
dumped
say
the
that.
blood out into a tin foil pan, and all there was blood and a blood clot.
Hmm.
And I wish that we had thought at the time for her to do an analysis on the blood and the blood clot to see if there were any chemicals there or elements that should not have been in blood. But I didn't even think about that at the time,
Well, I remember Roger Lear would
unfortunately.
take them out, and he said as soon as you take them out and put them down, that they'd start to like dissolve or disintegrate. Yeah.
Right. Yes. But Roger Lear also said that he had been able to save some by putting them in bodily fluids.
Ah.
And that was where the information came
Oh,
for
yeah.
me to have him put it into his blood.
Because it's confused. It still thinks it's in the body. when it's in the
Yes.
blood, right?
Yes, that's what I hoped. But maybe that dry ice warned it that it was no longer in the body. I don't know.
Something.
But
Yeah.
anyway, it had dissolved. And within a few days, I received a message from a state director at MUFON who said, we had this implant removed and it's dissolving in front of my eyes. We have to rush this through. But I'm sure that it had completely dissolved by the time it
That's what
arrived at
happens.
the
They
place where
used
it
to
was found.
say, like back in the day, we used to carry one of those 50-pound magnets. And they used
Yes,
to say that if you like ran it over your arm, it would pull it up or you could see
right.
something in there.
Yes, there was a metallic substance in there at the time,
Yeah,
and it would move under a magnet.
that's interesting. Yeah, I never did that, but I had one of those magnets with my gear. I never got a chance to try it, but
Yes, it wouldn't move down the body, but it would move out just slightly. The experiencer could feel that.
yeah, if there's just something magnetic pulling it, yeah,
Yes, yeah, and you could
yeah.
see that. But that doesn't happen anymore, I don't think, because of it's more of a nanotechnology crystalline structure now.
They'll show up in X-rays too sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. And the ETs are either placing them in areas like underneath the teeth into the jaw.
Up in the sinuses too.
Oh yeah. But they've placed them in areas around nerve centers where if you remove them, you might cause paralysis too. So they don't really like the fact that we're removing them, apparently.
It's like a booby trap. If you do it,
Yes,
it'll injure you. Yeah,
in a sense, yes. So,
that's crazy.
but in other cases, such as in our friend Denise Stoner, they have inserted them into her foot or into her hand, and they have intelligence and they have traveled. I actually palpated one that was in Denise's arm after she was taken, and it was moving up her arm. She was watching it as it was
Jeez.
moving. And then she thought, well, maybe she'd go for an x-ray, but it just disappeared into her body before she was able to have it
She
x-rayed.
just probably doesn't know where it is anymore.
No, probably not. It's probably somewhere in her head, in an area where it would be impossible to remove it without
So,
damaging her
so
tissues.
that's why when Denise and I, she's working with the fellow right now, and she does like a preview or questions the person first, interviews them,
Hmm.
and that's what you were saying. You said that you guys try to more focus on the ones that are like have some memory of what happened to them, as opposed to somebody that's on psychotropic drugs in a hospital or something. Yeah. So
Right,
that's what the part of the
absolutely.
interview is to sort of figure all that out, which makes sense.
Yeah, because then when I was doing investigations, and I'm not doing investigations any longer, but when I was doing that, when I worked with a person over a period of years, they were able to acquire some very good evidence. So let me go on with my story about
Yeah, please do.
Jim. He let me use his name,
Sure.
Jim, the man in Canada. We came to a point where he had swollen glands, he thought. They were terribly swollen.
Ooh.
And so he went to the doctor and he took antibiotics and they didn't go away. And I have photographs of it, just very large, extending around to the back of his neck. And I have his medical record from uh, the medical team that he went for before
Right,
because
right.
he had been diagnosed with lymphoma, cancerous lymphoma, which was he was afraid it was going to kill him. And I said to him, well, did you know that I've worked with people who have been healed? And if you ask your ETs for healing, perhaps they'll come and heal you. So uh, he said, how do I ask? And I said, well, just meditate several times a day
Hmm.
and ask them to come and heal you. And a couple of weeks later, I received a video from him. He called me and told me that he had gone to bed. He showed me the photographs again of the very enlarged nodes in his neck. And during the night, he was a guy who would always sense when the ETs were around. And he had taken many photographs of light beams coming down from the sky, just with actual entities inside.
Mhm.
He had taken photographs of non-humans out in his yard, but none of them were really, really clear. But he sensed that on that night that something was coming, and he had his video camera ready, and he videoed this beautiful light blue orb that slid down his wall and then morphed as it flew like a butterfly
Hmm.
across the room. And blue on the outside, pale blue, and sort of an ecru color lighted in the center. And it hovered over his body briefly and then dove down into his body. And this is when he fell asleep. And he slept for 12 hours. And when he woke up, the nodes on his neck were no longer visible. Now, he still went in for surgery.
That's a pretty good story. Yep.
And when he had the surgery, they removed four tiny necrotic nodes that were no longer cancerous. They were just dying.
Hmm.
So, pretty remarkable evidence there. Um, because I accept it. Other people who have looked at it have accepted it. A medical doctor has his medical records pertaining to this, the HIPAA protected medical records. And it's been spoken about among other researchers who became aware of what occurred. So it's pretty well known at this point. I sometimes show that video and tell that about that account. Another time, he sensed a presence and he was able to actually photograph a non-human entity in his bedroom. It was only about 3 feet tall, little guy, and at first it reminded me of an elf
It was a
rather than
humanoid though, two arms, two legs.
it was
Yeah.
humanoid, two
Mhm.
arms, two legs, large head. It was wearing technology. It was really very, very interesting to observe.
Was
The
it a
first
pretty
thing I
clear
think
picture?
of is a good picture. First
Wow.
thing I thought of is this some kind of a hoax? You always have to look at that, even if you begin to trust somebody. Maybe they just want to push it further. And so, I sent it off for analysis by people I trust because some people I don't trust. They simply analyze it as, oh, it's probably an inflatable doll or something like that. But it was really remarkable to me because I have several photographs of different types of non-human entities that have been sent to me by people I've worked with over the years, because I
We
have
have
always pushed
um
it further for more
Linda
evidence.
Linda
Or
Thomas Thompson is on our advisory board, and she does really
yes.
excellent photo analysis work. She's
Hmm.
really good.
Hmm.
I mean, some of these government guys send stuff to her, but
Oh,
if you
well,
ever
that's
need her,
great.
I'm sure she'd help you.
Yeah, that would be good to have another pair of eyes look at it.
Yeah. Um, that there was well, I don't want to get up. There was I remember during the ERT meeting that somebody had those pictures, and I don't know if you were in that meeting, and they had photographs, and Linda, did an analysis on them, and you could see there was this like round disc thing, and then she enhanced it, and you could see that it was like a pole there behind it, that
Oh,
it was totally phony, but it wasn't even
oh,
really a good phony picture, but
hmm.
it was pretty
Yeah,
obvious. But
yes.
so when you were talking about telepathic communication with ETs.
Yes.
And, one of the things that I'm bumping into a lot now is people are talking about, you know, I think it's becoming more and more generally accepted that there are non-human presence here on this planet, but sometimes people try to categorize them, the good guys and the bad guys.
Oh, yes.
Um, in all the years
We
that I've
tend to
been
do.
doing this, I've never really ran into people that they were all benevolent, the ones that I ended up being around.
Mm.
Um, but I mean, what do you think about that?
I think that according to all of the research studies I've worked on,
Right.
it, it runs the gamut from the spectrum from highly negative to highly positive. So, sort of
Yeah.
demonic on one end,
Yeah.
angelic on the other. But the majority, good 80%, are more or less neutral. They just have a job to do, and they're doing that job. So some of them are nicer, more considerate than others. Some are more frightening and less caring about humans than others. Um, on the negative end of that, it would be probably the reptilians who uh, shapeshift into handsome looking humans who rape the individual. And during the sexual encounter, it morphs back into a reptilian, which is pretty disgusting and
Yeah.
frightening and highly negative. But on the other end of that spectrum are entities who, and even gray entities, because there are many different kinds of gray
Um,
entities. That's a body type, but their behavior can vary incredibly. And on those human types on the benevolent end and the grays on the benevolent end are more likely to care about you, to communicate with you, to give you information. If you're ill, they might heal you, especially if you've asked for healing. Um, I think that they really do work together. I have cases and very compelling cases where the human types that are non-human have worked with both the grays and with the insectoid types. They're the mantis types.
hmm.
And there are lots of photographs of mantis types. They seem to not really care if you're taking photographs of them.
I can't imagine you'd want to run into one of those guys. That'd be pretty creepy, but
I think it would be really creepy too. Fortunately, I have never run into one of those types.
me either. Um, so going back, telepathic communication.
Yes.
Um, it seems like, all the people that are out there that seem to have encounters, it's almost always they say it's telepathic. You can just hear the
Yes.
thoughts. And I mean, I've heard that over the years in hundreds and hundreds of reports. People say that they can just you can sort there, because sometimes they'll say, was it in English or what? And sometimes they're not sure, but whatever is supposed to be conveyed was really clearly conveyed.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Some people say that they hear a little buzzing tone or a little whooshing sound in the presence of some of these non-humans, but generally, you think of it as a universal language. Their thoughts, whether it's thoughts or technology, whatever they're using, um, are transferred to us, and we, regardless of what language we speak, understand it in our own language. So
Right.
it's pretty amazing. And if we learn to communicate back telepathically with them, then we can have more than just a one-way, one-sided conversation or no conversation, just education. You can have discussion, you can ask questions. So that's after you overcome fear, something that people try successfully. And this is how we have been able to obtain further information about why they're here.
It seems to me I've had people, it was more like a two-way conversation where they were able to communicate with them. And they'll say my mouth wasn't moving, they weren't talking, but
Hmm.
I've not
Yes.
experienced that, but I would think there are people that, some of these people that do the remote viewing and, like at the Monroe Institute where they're doing the, out of body training and all that. I imagine there's people that can do that.
Yes, and I think the higher level experiencers, those who have been taken through generations, possibly, who have psychic abilities, who are empathic. Um, the
There,
ETs are mostly empaths. They can feel our emotions, they sense it. For the humans who can sense the ET's emotions, or whatever they are, non-human intelligence, then it's easier to communicate. And if you've advanced that far, you might have visions too. So they can put a vision of something into your mind. Or maybe they're going to show you something on a screen that
yeah,
you're
I've heard
going
that
to
before.
look
Yeah.
at. Poor Calvin Parker um, had some difficulties, great difficulties during, I worked with him in hypnosis. And he was taken a second time that he knew of in the 1990s. And he was shown either on a screen or in visions, um, uh, terrible destruction
I've
on
heard
this
people say
earth.
that, exactly that. Yeah.
It was a warning against the use of nuclear weapons, and they
Right.
were very angry with him because they thought that his mission on this planet was to be an activist, to warn people against the dangers of nuclear weapons. And they treated him pretty rather poorly and were showing him these horrifying images of the consequences of nuclear war.
Yeah. I've,
Of
I've had people say exactly what you just said, that it was like a
yes,
screen. They took them to watch it,
hmm,
and it was like
yeah.
destruction.
And
But
his father worked on the Nuclear Energy Commission, and Calvin, his father owned a drilling company, and Calvin ran that drilling company as he grew older, and they were drilling holes on nuclear for nuclear bases, for missile silos.
uh,
And so the ETs that took Calvin were extraordinarily upset that this message had not been delivered. And, dating back into the 1940s when they first started talking with humans, that was always a concern because they said that uh, this thermonuclear weapons can tear into the space-time
they
continuum
do.
and cause damage into other dimensions where they lived.
Yeah, that's the research that I've seen is that basically the quantum physicists will tell you if you detonate a nuclear device, it transcends outside this time-space reality into other dimensions, and it
Yes.
interrupts the fabric of space. And so from a galactic perspective, it's dangerous, you know.
And I'm glad that scientists have finally caught up to the ETs who were telling people that way back in the early 50s.
Well, I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now, I'm interviewing a guy that was involved in like the missile silo bases and stuff.
Hmm.
And there seems to be a lot of people believe that a big part of the agenda that the ETs, that non-human NHI have, excuse me, we're not using ET anymore, But the NHI, the non-human intelligence out there, is really concerned about nuclear weapons. And by that, you have all kinds of activity over anything that's nuclear. They're around nuclear power plants, missile bases, um, you know, Air Force bases that have nuclear weapons on planes and stuff like that. They seem to
Hmm.
pay a lot of attention to that for obvious reasons. And they're obviously worried about that. And if
Do
you
you,
think about it, it really started back. The really heavy traffic really started back in the Truman administration when they started experimenting, doing nuclear experiments, and then blowing up Japan and all that. Um,
yes,
you
and the
know.
above ground nuclear tests carried through the air and rained down on New England,
Oh,
onto the grass, onto the cattle. The children were drinking the milk. We
exactly.
were eating the beef, most of many people in my generation who grew up there have thyroid problems.
Right. That's what
And
it's from, radiation.
and yes, fortunately, I didn't like milk, so
Yeah,
I only
well,
drank what I was forced to. But many of my friends are taking medication for
one of the
thyroid
things that,
problems.
in the research I've done is look at dimensional existences, and if you remember back in the you remember back in the when we were talking about people that are psychic and stuff like that. The
Yes.
there's that CERN project, the Hadron Particle Accelerator. It's in France and Switzerland.
Hmm.
Um, Basically, they've 10 years ago, they came out and said that they've identified 12 physical dimensional existences outside this time-space reality. So there are other
Hmm.
dimensions. And I've
Yes.
always thought, that basically they define a dimension by a certain frequency you resonate at. And so if the reason we can see each other is because we're vibrating at we're at the same frequency. And
Yes.
I think people that are psychic and that have these special abilities, their frequency range is a little wider than ours, so they can actually see into other dimensions a little bit and pick
Hmm.
stuff up. You see what I'm saying? So there are
Yes.
people that are clearly that are telepathic, that are what was the word you used when they can sense something? Empathic.
Empathic.
Yeah. And there are people that clearly are like that. Uh,
Yes, it's the
and
psychic sense.
yeah, and
Hmm.
I mean for real, like they'll be able to tell you stuff that there's psychics that work for police departments. Somebody disappears, and the
Hmm.
lady's like, "Okay, go down this road, and there's a green dumpster back at the end of this, and he's in the dumpster, and there he is.
Right.
And
Yes.
that's they
We
do it all
we
the
have
time.
so many abilities that we're capable of developing um,
Yes, yeah,
that have been uh, sort of placed in an area of disrespect by our government, who has been wanting to cover up the experiments that they've been
totally,
doing by our
totally.
military.
Well, and a lot of it has to do with our programming too. You
Hmm.
know, um, I was talking to some friends that went to the Monroe Institute, and
Hmm.
they have a course there. They teach people how to ho- s- hold on to hold on to a spoon, and you can bend it, you know.
Yes.
And this guy and his wife, they're like my age, and they were in there, and he said it's really hard because it's impossible. And he said in the class they bring this 4-year-old kid in like 4 minutes he could do it. And the
Mm.
guy goes, you know why he can do it and you can't? And the answer is because he hasn't learned it's impossible yet. But our programming, a lot of our abilities are stifled because we've been programmed to not believe that that you can do that stuff. And so you have
Absolutely.
to undo your programming if you want to dig deeper in this. And it comes from when you're a little kid and you're in Sunday school and your parents and your school. By the time you're 7 or 8, you've been pretty well programmed on what the rules are and how it works. And that makes it tough for
Mhm.
a lot of the things that people do that aren't that we don't think are so possible, but Of course, in this world, we've seen a lot of things that other people haven't too that, makes it a little bit more interesting.
It does.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, you said there was one thing you were telling me about an experiment you did with telepathic communication.
Yes. And I thought that I would never participate in anything like this and that I was going to keep it confidential and never mention it. But uh, it began when Dr. Melanie Barton Bragg and Denise Stoner went to the MUFON Symposium in 2016 in Orlando. I was a speaker there, so I did not meet Kevin Briggs, but Melanie and Denise met him, and he said that the ETs had sent him to the MUFON Symposium because he was to meet some people who the ETs wanted to communicate with,
Interesting.
and which sounded a little kooky, and so
I think it
um,
happens, though. I'm sure it does, but
yeah, it does happen. And a few weeks later, he we were invited to join him for lunch. And so Melanie lives way up in Tallahassee, and Denise over past Orlando. And come to find out, this man lives in the same town that I live in,
whoa,
in Central Florida. Just it seems beyond coincidence sometimes. And so we all met for lunch, and I really wanted Denise to be there because she is such a good person for assessing the integrity of another individual. And so
I
she
agree
was
with that. Yeah.
watching him, his body language. She's probably one of the best or the best investigator I've ever met.
Yeah, there's an intuition that goes along with that. Yeah.
There is. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's just remarkable. I loved
I
working
agree
with
with that.
her.
And I've known her for 20 years at least, but
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
So Denise was watching his body language. We enjoyed lunch together, and that was fine. And he didn't say anything about the experiment. But then we met few weeks later for lunch again.
Hmm.
And this time we talked so long that I don't know if the restaurant was closing down or
Right.
what, but we thought we should vacate our table. So I invited everyone over to my house.
Got you.
And I had already hypnotized Kevin at that point because he had been taken from the time he was a little boy and living in England, in the north of England. And he grew up there. He was a police officer. He was married to a woman who worked at, I believe it was Leeds, and she worked in the psychology department and taught classes there and had some publications, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so, here down to earth, credible individuals. And he was a real estate agent here. And so we're back at my house and we're continuing with our conversation when Denise and Melanie start talking about, do you know what he's doing? And I'm not a good observer, um, but he was beginning to channel information. And he had never done this before, but they could tell by looking at him that it was something else that was taking place, not just something that he was relying on his memory for. And finally, this led to an offer to meet with these non-humans, this council of eight or nine. They call themselves the Council of Eight, but there are nine of them.
This is the guy that ended up being in your book, right?
Yes,
Yeah, okay, I read that
yes,
book. Yeah, yeah.
yes. Forbidden knowledge.
Yeah,
A personal journey from alien abduction to spiritual transformation.
right.
And so we decided that once a month, we would meet at Kevin's home. Denise and Melanie would stay at my home because of the travel distance, and that we would be permitted to ask a few questions. So we began doing this, and we did it for 2 years. And first, it was the four of us. And in the beginning, we said that we wanted evidence. The only way that we would do this would be if they would provide us with evidence to show that this was something that was real, and not just the ramblings of coming from Kevin's consciousness, or a hoax or anything like that. And so they agreed to give us some evidence. The first thing they agreed to do was to show each of us their craft. So Melanie's appointment was first, and they came down and they showed her their craft.
You
It
mean
lit up her
literally
yard.
landed or got close to the?
It got close enough to light up her yard.
Hmm, that's pretty close.
Then next was Denise. And so she was outside, and she lives in a heavily populated area. So it didn't come in close, but it came in close enough so that she could see that it was flying erratically and did not have conventional lighting.
Right.
So that was her experience. For my experience, I wanted more than a distant craft.
Uh-uh.
And I
Did
wasn't
you make
willing
them
to
land in
stay
your
up.
backyard or something?
That's what I wanted. I wanted a close-up sighting. They could hover over my lake. They could land in the backyard. And another requirement I had is that I was not going to get up in the middle of the night or stay up late to see them, because I need my sleep. So
Would they
then
let you guys photograph them?
we didn't even ask to photograph them, but I was ready to anyway. So I was outside. It was still dark out. It was something like 5 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden, I sensed this very, very strong tingling sensation in my body. And I knew that it was the little gray Zark, who said that he wanted to communicate with me because he said I had a scientific mind, and that's what he was looking for in an individual to communicate with telepathically. He had already come to me once and communicated telepathically. So I felt his presence, and I looked out over the lake, and all of a sudden there was a whirling circle of water, very turbulent water.
It was
And I
stirring the
was
water up.
I was expecting to see this craft rise up out of the lake. And so I was ready with my camera, and it didn't happen. And all there was that turbulence that I could see with my eyes, but I couldn't get it because it wasn't sunlight, and it wouldn't take on my camera. And so here I was there just watching this and feeling Zark's presence very, very strongly. And in the end, he said that it was his energy. It wasn't a craft because uh, people's lights were beginning to turn on and that sort of thing. Too many people might observe it. It was not a craft under the water or an invisible craft or cloaked craft, that it was his energy that was creating this for me. So I was disappointed, I have to tell you, but
Well,
it was some
it's better
evidence.
than most people get.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And then another time they showed me twinkling lights like orbs. Another time they showed me three little orbs that were bouncing, sort of almost like a caterpillar, walking one after another across my lawn. at night. They were
Wow.
internally lighted with amber lights, and the external was grayish white. So I saw those as well. And Zark stayed with me and communicated with me from time to time. And um, there were two times that I attempted to call him in to my environment. And he came dashing in and broke my windows each time. His energy was too strong, and it cost me a couple of $1,000 for those repairs. So I stopped doing that.
Or go outside so you don't have to break the windows.
Right. And another time, he was responsible for delivering old mail to my house. I'd returned home from the gym or something, and there on my husband's nightstand, on my nightstand, and behind my toilet were old letters
He dropped them off.
from months before.
Hmm.
And because we never put mail there in
Right,
those
of course.
spots, we have our place for our mail. And so I began to wonder, well, what's going on? Is this Zark playing a trick on me or what? And so I asked my husband to get in touch with the post office and ask them to check a mailbox down the street, which was like a group mailbox for uh, a development that's near my home. And sure enough, there was my mail in that box, and it was returned and it was put into the correct mailbox. And it was months old. So I guess it was a little bit of help from Zark. That's the only thing that I can think of.
When you were talking about the book and you guys had the chance to ask him questions,
Hmm.
I remember reading in there, somebody asked him about how the propulsion works. And the way he explained it is exactly how that works. Electrogravitic propulsion, it's got a
Yes,
sphere with mercury in it and there's copper things rotating in it.
yes,
That was exactly correct what he said.
yes. How do you know that?
I've done some research, let's put it that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
It's not,
yeah.
I never put anything in my books that's classified,
Hmm.
but what he said, that's exactly how that works.
Yes.
Explains it very clearly and it makes it very understandable.
And I
Interesting.
guess some people weren't very happy that I'd put that in the book. I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe some brilliant scientist might read it and develop something. So I did remove some of that information from the book after that. But well, it's amazing that you're saying that.
Oh, I'm quite sure that's how it works.
But I mean, I think these entities are as real as real. They just live in a different dimension.
Right.
They're in the fifth dimension. Sometimes you can see them as shadowy figures. You can always feel a very strong electrical energy running through your body when
When he
they're
was doing the
near you.
channeling, could you feel it too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we measured the temperature around Kevin's body before and after. Denise had her laser thermometer. That was her job, was to use the scientific
I
measures.
got another idea for you when we get offline, I'll tell you
Okay.
about.
All right.
The
And
other thing I wanted to ask you, when I was talking to Denise, she was talking about an encounter she had. I
mhm,
think she was in a car or something. And she said afterwards, the mag I think it was a mag, like a tri-field meter.
it was a tri-field meter.
She said when you get close to it, it would set it off, the person. So there's
Yes.
a magnetic field around a person.
Well, she came to my house
She said, yeah.
and yeah, we set up the tri-field meter.
Right.
And um, of course, if you walk toward it, if you get close enough to it, you're going to set it off just from your energy. So you have to set it up. You have to measure
Hmm.
the electromagnetic field in your home around that area to make sure that it's going to work properly.
Right, right.
But then she went back and um, it was still going and on and on and on, buzzing 12 feet back.
Wow.
And then we thought that I was taken at the same time that she was taken
That's what she
that
said.
time. And so I tried this as well with the same results.
So what, if
But
I
then,
understand what you guys are saying is that after the exposure, for a period of time, you've got an electromagnetic field around you that'll set the meter off.
yes, now we
That's
tried
of
it too with my husband, which didn't set it off at all, with
course.
her husband, which did not set it off at all, and with her daughter. So we had three where it behaved normally, but two people who had been taken to this non-human environment who set it off from 12 feet in the distance.
Wow. Because we've had cases where cars get charged like that.
Hmm.
You know, there was a case up in New York where it something hovered maybe 100 feet over the car, and
Hmm.
not very long either. At least we don't think it was very long. But after that, the car had a huge magnetic field around it. You can measure it with the meter,
Right. I was
and
really shocked by the human body having
that's what
that.
I was trying to figure. I could see if it was something metallic. You know, it's like when we were in science class, you put a magnet on a nail, and after a while, the nail's magnetic, something
Right.
metallic. But on a person, that's must charge up the nervous system somehow. I mean,
It must.
it's bizarre, but
It is. It
it
is. We tried it on three other individuals too who had just been recently been taken, and they had the same effect.
it's one we're talking. Wait a minute, I get this so you can see it. These things,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah, the tri-field
we had a
meter.
guy up in he had one of these, and he was up one in New Jersey with the drone thing that was going on. Joe
Hmm.
D'Eduardo, he was one of the people that worked with Denise and I back in the Bass Project. And he said that that thing got within 70 yards of him, and he said this thing was just pegging it when he did it.
Hmm.
And he actually felt that he had like some sunburn on his face afterwards.
Hmm.
It was like from 70
Yeah.
yards out.
Wow.
So they do
I've
put
had
out a,
sunburn without the sun too.
yeah.
One time, but not with a tri-field meter in my hand.
No, well, he had the meter. He didn't have a radiation detector with him.
Hmm.
But usually, like, we just did a podcast like the six field tests that you do. One is the tri-field, the radiation meters, compasses, GPSs will also react to it, that kind of thing, and
Yes.
watches time, you know.
Hmm.
But this has been fun. We have to do this again.
Yes, it has been.
Yeah. Denise is working with one of the guys that as a matter of fact, when I called her today, she goes, "We're getting ready to get on Zoom in about 20 minutes." So
Hmm.
we'll we'll see how that goes. But I really appreciate you doing this. This was fun. I'd like to do it again.
Oh, that
And
sounds great, Richard. I really enjoyed our conversation.
me too. Me too. Aerospace Research Operations is an organization that's domiciled in Virginia and registered with the State Corporation Commission. Also known by the acronym AEROPS, which is a scientific research cooperative that's focused on unidentified anomalous phenomena and the associated high strangeness and paranormal effects that typically result after an encounter. Please check out our website at AEROPS.site. You'll be able to find current posts, new information, and a list of advisory board members. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.